This is Curtis at thedigitalphotocoach.com. I'm going to show you how to use Photoshop to make this image look a little softer. When I look at it, it seems like this abrupt cutoff of the hand right through the wrist seems a little extreme, and it's kind of jarring when I look at it. So I want to soften this transition. And there's a couple of ways to do it. There's an action in Photoshop that we can use, and there's also another approach that I'll show you after we look at that first one. So I've opened it in Camera Raw, and I'm going to do a couple things just to fix the image a little bit. I'm going to bring up the fill light a little bit so it's not quite so dark, and I'm going to maybe give it just a little more contrast. And it looks a little fuzzy to me through here too. So I'm going to go after the clarity. Clarity deals with increasing the distinction in the very gray areas. And if I raise this up, I think you can probably see that this transition here and some of the other things in the image aren't quite as blurry as they were before. And I'm also going to raise the vibrance. Vibrance works by it's kind of like saturation. Saturation, I'm going to move the slider so you can see what happens. If I bump this up, it pushes all the colors to being a lot more saturated, or I can desaturate with it. But it's a very blunt axe, and what I want to do is just bring up the saturation in the areas that are kind of unsaturated. So I will use the vibrance and take it up to, say about there, around 50, and that looks pretty good to me. So I think I'm done with this, and I'm going to open the image now in Photoshop and make it a little bit smaller so you can see it all. And first of all, we're going to start out using this action that I talked about. The action it makes a vignette, and it operates on a selection. So first of all, we need to make a selection. I'll use the elliptical marquee tool and just make a selection around the hand, and I can use my cursor up, down, and left and right arrows now to move this around some. And where I think I've got it the way I like it, I'm going to open the actions now and run the action. This is a default action that Photoshop comes with it, and it's the very first one you see in a default vignette, and it goes through these steps. And the nice thing about actions are that you can record an action, you can make your own in Photoshop. So if you have something that you do repeatedly, you can automate the process by making an action, and then in the future, instead of going through all of these steps and answering questions and dialog boxes all along the way, you can simply click the arrow here to cause the action to execute. One other thing I want you to notice, there's a little box here, and that's a dialog, and I can turn the dialog off, and then Photoshop will do whatever it did when the action was created, which is, this is to feather a 5-pixel radius. I think I want a bigger radius than that, so I'm going to turn this back on, and now when the action starts running, Photoshop will stop at that point and allow me to select a different radius. So here we go. Clicking, and the 5 pixels came up, and I'm going to change that to 50 and say OK. And when I do, it's going to run through the rest of these very quickly, so you can just watch it happen. And there is the vignette. I can get the move tool and, oops, I'm on the wrong layer. Do a Control Z, that'll take that back where it was. I want to get on this layer and move that up. And so now we have an image that's somewhat softer than we had before. But this worked on a selection that I made, and it's appropriate for some things. But I think sometimes you might want to do a softening where it operates all the way around the border, and maybe in a rectangular selection instead of a circular one or ellipsoidal one. So I'm going to show you how to do that too. I'm just going to turn these two layers off. Actually, I think I'll just delete them. Drag it down to the ash can. And we'll start out here. And I'm going to make a selection. I'm going to get the rectangular tool and select a 250 pixel feathering, and that will soften the edges of the selection. So I'm going to just drag across here, and you'll see now the borders of the selection are rounded, and I can copy this, edit, copy, and edit and paste it, and I have this new copy that is a little bit softer. Let me turn this lower layer off, and you can see it's a little softer than where we started, and I'm going to put a white layer underneath it so it'll show up a little bit better. I've created a new layer, and I will get the paintbrush tool, paint bucket tool, I'm sorry, and toggle over here to white and go in on this layer and put white behind it. So we have a softer edge now than we did before, and I kind of like it, but I think I'd like to take it a little bit farther. This is something you can easily do. We simply reselect this layer and get the rectangular marquee tool again, and we will feather 250 pixels. Just make that selection by clicking and dragging across, and we have the selection made now. We can edit and copy and edit and paste. And now if we turn off this first one, we see that we've got an even softer look than we had. Let me show you. This was the look after we made the selection one time, and then when we've clicked and feathered, made a feathered selection on the feathered selection and pasted that in, we got an even softer look. I kind of like this, but there's another option. Instead of putting on a white background, you could put on a different color. I'll create a new layer, and I need to get it down below there. Okay, now I get the new layer, and I'm going to fill with my paint bucket, but I think I'm going to use black this time. So we've got black selected. I'll get the paintbrush, the paint bucket, and click on that layer, and it has filled it in with black, which is kind of a nice look too. If you think this is overdone, then you can go to the opacity on the black layer and reduce it some, and get into the gray regions, and do this to whatever extent you like to get the effect that you like in this softened image. So that's how we do it, and I thank you for watching and remind you to go to the digitalphotocoach.com. There are new video tutorials and new articles, 2 or 3 posted every week for sure, and I'll be doing one shortly that will show you how to create your own actions, so that if there's something like this that you do repeatedly, you would be able to create your own action and save some time in that way. So once again, thanks for watching, and when I have the new tutorial showing you how to create actions, I will put a link to it in this post so you can easily get from this one to that one.